thumbs up. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first session this afternoon on AI in university contracts. We have the pleasure today to have two panelists, Matt D'Amelio, first to my left. He's the director of the University Contracts Office at Carnegie Mellon University. He also supports the NetPlus team as the vice chair of our Business Procurement and Legal Advisory Committee, as well as serving on the legal subgroup for our Anthropic service evaluation. Next to Matt is Jason Pollack. He's the Associate VP of IT at the University of Maryland at Baltimore County. Jason serves in the legal and the business model subgroups of the Anthropic service evaluation. Today they're going to share how they each leverage LLMs to increase efficiency and effectiveness of time-consuming contract process reviews. So first up will be Matt talking about what they do at Carnegie Mellon.
Thank you, Sue. I know everybody's been waiting for me to get up here and actually speak in public because I'm so shy, so let's just go from this place. So one of the things that happened today to me was that I started to read my email with regard to this event, and Sue had indicated in an email that I had to use some sort of template. So I suppose that must have been buried in the registration terms and conditions that I did not read. So this is my template. I hope you like it. All right, now to my presentation. This is the Carnegie Mellon official university template with the Carnegie Mellon tartan, which you're obligated to wear anytime you're out in public. So I am Matthew D'Amelio. I am the director of the University Contracts Office at Carnegie Mellon University, which is part of the Office of General Counsel. And before I start any program, because I'm a lawyer, these are the legal disclaimers. You cannot rely upon anything I say. You can't rely upon anything I do. Part of this presentation was made with AI, so therefore it's sort of open source and hallucinations. But just remember, don't take any of this legal advice from anybody, including any legal advice from me. All right, so what happens at the University Contracts Office? We are part of the Office of General Counsel, not finance or procurement, but we support finance. It was established in 2008. And the idea was to separate procurement services at Carnegie Mellon from the actual legal review of contracts. As a result of that, what we had was a pretty big influx of volume. So we get about 14,000 emails a year that generate someplace between $7,000 and $8,000 agreement. Buried in that number is every SaaS and software that the university attempts to review. Now, I cannot stand here in good conscience and tell you that we review every piece of software, but we try. There are some people who don't like it. Professor Rowe, ECE, I didn't say that, right? He has questioned whether or not I have the capacity to do this, but anyway, I digress. All right, so what do we do when we review the software and SaaS process at the university, right? We got to read the terms and conditions is the bottom line. Everybody out here has read terms and conditions. Everybody knows how boring they are. Anybody who has the book, anybody have the graphic novel, Terms and Conditions? Anybody? Really? Nobody? I have that book. It's really interesting. So if you've never seen the Apple Terms and Conditions to a graphic novel, you should pick that up. It's really a lot of fun. So anyway, the big items that are always missing in these things are FERPA, accessibility, et cetera, those different items. Those things are always missing. But we have to figure that out. A couple years ago, our CIO decided that what he wanted to do was have all software go to one place. So computing services, which is central IT at the university, created what they call the software front door. So that what that does now is we've moved everybody out of asking the university or asking the University Contracts Office rather, from reviewing software to go to the front door. Now, the reason I agreed to this, and nobody else from CMU is in the room, right? The reason I agreed to this was because they told me that our approvals would then be put into the process and we would not have to read them a second time. That was an exaggeration. But anyway, so all that goes through. So prior to this, as you could see, the bottom number, over the 15 years, going on 16 now that I was a contracts director, we had cleared about 9,000 titles. So that gives you just a rough estimate of what we do. In the first 12 months of the software front door, we cleared 1,000 titles. So that's 1,000 pieces. Now, you're looking and say, geez, Matt, you don't look like you worked that hard. And I know that's probably true because I have a guy, his name is Brian Spoles. He's the person who starts the review process. So what we tried to do was what's in all of these click-through agreements? Because probably the fair percentage of the software or SaaS agreements that we review, 10% have a written agreement, 10%, and in that written agreement includes all the ones that comes with a quote that incorporates the terms and conditions that we have to review anyway. But the rest of them, probably a good 90% of them are just, what do you get online and what do you do? So what we tried to do is, from a legal standpoint, and I think anybody who's read terms and conditions knows this, they know that when you're going to look at click-through terms and conditions, you know that the terms are going to be bad, and you know that the terms are not going to be beneficial. So there's a large school of thought on this bubble that basically indicates why bother reading them, right? If they're all bad and they're all crappy, what are you going to do? You're not going to be able to negotiate them. You're not going to be able to do anything. But what the key for Carnegie Mellon was that what we wanted to do was be able to assess the risk in moving forward. So our problem was, how do we do that, right? And so we had this grand idea that we would use a Gemini Gem. And up until the point that the then AI director at the university, Bo Powers, told me that, I did not know what a Gemini Gem was. She then explained it to me, and I said, gee whiz, that seems like a lot of work for me to figure out what those standard prompts, what those standard questions will be, at which point Bo said to me, just ask ChatGPT to write it for you. And so that's the beginning of how we created the Gem, was through ChatGPT. So what did that mean? So what the Gem looks for is sort of on a very small scale, it looks for the data ownership, the use rights, jurisdiction, export, compliance, the FERPA clause, things like that. What we're looking for when we process that Gem is we're looking for a positive on something we know that's not there. So it's sort of a backwards way of looking at reading the conditions. We know they're bad, but if the Gem spits out and says they're FERPA compliant, that requires us then to say they can't possibly be FERPA compliant. Let's really look and dig down and see where the Gem is saying that comes out of. And so what that does is that speeds up the analysis. We know that it's not going to show this stuff, but when the analysis shows, hey, you have a positive hit, more or less, then at that point in time we're in really good shape because we can do more work. So how do we get that information in there? So it's very simple. It's what everybody does, right? You go to the site, you locate the documents, you copy the terms, whatever terms they will give you online, we cut, paste it, drop it into the Gem. And then what we do is we just put that in, you upload it to the Gem, you hit the go button or whatever that little arrow thing is, I call it the go button. You hit that, and then you receive back the structured response of what it found and where it found it. And that's the basis of it. So what would normally take us in the past, 50 minutes, 45 minutes to read, basically now is cut down to like 10 to 15. So it makes us makes us a lot more efficient, gives us more time to play golf, I guess. Did I say that? And works that way. So those are the reasons. So here we go. Ready? This is, I hope this works. All right. So in our software, or not, in our ServiceNow system, which is where the software goes through, we get a contract request. And this is a contract request that came through recently within the last week to 10 days. I have taken out BC's actual name, but you could see this is all we get. The software application and URL, which was an item called WAN-AI, or WAN-AI, depending upon what you want to do with it. And the interesting part in this is that the last line, which is discretionary of the PI to be used to pay the costs. So this is students requesting software to generate videos using student-created models to validate research. Seems like pretty easy stuff, right? So let's see what happens. So now we have to go to this. There we go there. And then we'll go to this. And we'll go to this. All right. So this is the click-through. You could see that I have reviewed in the last few weeks Bright Data, Kanabachi, whatever that was, well, anyway. So down below here, what you'll see is this is all of the terms and conditions that were pasted in earlier, everything that they had publicly available on their website. And then if we hit that button, and if the internet actually works, there's your response. So now, what we look at in this one is that we ask these questions with regard to affiliation, okay? And we ask these questions with regard to affiliation because it's important to us, right? If you are a federal contractor and you want to make sure things are not explicit or in there. But what we have is there's no affiliation with regard to that. There's no banned technology, from what I could tell, so it looks pretty good, right? And then you go down and you go through the stuff. They're not, there's no mention of FERPA or HIPAA, right? So no mention of that. They're not mentioning that. Everything that we anticipate that we would look. The other thing it does is it gives us all of the embedded hyperlinks that are in the documentation to make sure we see them, and then it gives us all the restrictions of use. And that's usually Section 3. Anybody who reads these all the time, right, Jason? You would agree it's like Section 3 tells you what you can and can't do. And so that's what happens. So it gives us immediately. Then what it does is it asks me what I want to use or what do I want to do further. But what the Gem does and really helps what we do is the Gem then allows us to save this and export it as a Google Doc so that we have this review, we have the date that we reviewed it, and we know what we saw. And from that, we can then generate, you can actually ask the next question in this, which is usually somewhere along the lines of, can you write me an email that says I approve this item for practical purposes? It can be used, and then we classify the data that can go in there, and that's it. And so an item that used to take us 40 or 50 minutes, we sort of cured this using the Gemini Gem, and it really has streamlined the item. We have pumped other stuff into this. Sometimes I will put in an actual agreement that I get just to do an initial first read, and it just creates a speed and efficiency that we did not have in the process for, and this is a risk issue, right? So for us, the risk issue, when you qualify risk in this space, it's what's the data, where is it going, and who has control of it. And that's Carnegie Mellon's focus. And so what it does is it focuses on a risk issue at that point in time and do that. So that was pretty good. I got that done. That's the Gem. Now, this is an out-of-the-box solution, okay? So, we didn't do a lot to it. Like I said, we did it, and it's a very simple thing to set up. And let's see, if I do this, and I go to here, and I go to here, and I go to here, and hopefully that works, but it didn't. Edit. It's not showing you where the Gem is, but that's my problem because I'm not technically savvy here enough for this. So that's where we're at. Any questions as to why or how? Just out of curiosity. Can you talk a little bit? Yeah.
Still not on.
Go ahead. I didn't hear the question.
Do you ever have anyone go and parse a document in parallel from soup to nuts just to give it a sanity check? So often we have to question what comes out of AI. I'm just curious.
Sure. No, yeah, from our perspective, again, we look at it from if it spits out something we don't expect. So we expect it to sort of show us, one of the reasons we have, the one we really hope to look at that we try to make sure it doesn't is whether or not there's any kind of banned technology or it's one of those ones that connects to Alibaba. And then that's sort of we do it that way. But the only time we'll go back and really look at it is if it's something when we read the review that jumps off the page at us and says that. And when I say us, it's because the way it works in my office is Brian does all the initial review, and then if something pops out of the thing that he can't find or can't look at, he sends it to me. And then he says, you're going to have to take a look at this because I'm not sure we're in the right place here. So yeah, so I guess in a manner of speaking, yes. You could also ask it, I've done this before, to say, show me where you get that. And sometimes, a lot of times, especially if it digs deep in different places, what it'll find is, it'll find, and so this has done this a couple times, it's really odd, because I don't ask it to do this, but it'll find something on the internet and pull it into the review. So one of the places that I always have a lot of discussion with regard to the folks in computing services is that if somebody says, can you interpret the contract, and they show me some Q&A from the support department of Microsoft that says XYZ, and I go, yeah, well, I can't rely upon that because it's not a legal determination it's not in the terms and conditions, it's not linked to the terms and conditions, and therefore it doesn't apply. But that's as far as we go. It's sort of, at that point in time, and then it depends, right? If we really if somebody's really pushing us, if we go back and say, hey, you can only use this for public data, and they go, well, I really want to use it, we'll go back and sort of go through it again and do another review to try to dig deeper. But usually, if I can't negotiate the agreement, it doesn't go past private data or public data. It doesn't go into private. So go ahead.
So I'm assuming that you're using Gemini Pro.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm using.
Yeah.
You can tell me. Jason will tell me. He's really smart. Jason's really smart.
And the second part would be, I noticed you were just going in and using the fast model as opposed to like a thinking or some of the other ones. Have you tried some of the other perturbations and looking at some of these, or you just found from running all the contracts through that the simple way is the best way?
Yeah, I mean, so if we get a contract request that looks like this one that's on the screen, right? So this is a pure terms and conditions response, right? If there is a connection, in ServiceNow, you can connect the agreement. So if there's a quote connected, or if there's an actual agreement connected, an agreement goes up to me right away to take a look at. If a quote's there, then Brian takes a little bit more in depth. But everything that's just, hey, I want to download this or use this from the internet, goes through this initially. And if it comes back with what I anticipate to be crap, right, in a legal sense, that's a legal term, right? If it comes back that way, then at that point in time, I'm not going down this road past public data unless you have something to tell me that is the reason I should use this. And then I have to do, and then I'm like, I'm not going to negotiate with these people. They're not going to be accessible. You can't find them. We had success over the years. I can't say that that's 100% accurate, but over the years we had created what we call a FERPA addendum that has two parts to it that just has school official and accessibility. And we have sent that out to companies and they have signed off on it. Now, we don't test whether or not they're accessible, but Carnegie Mellon's one of the places that we have an in-house accessibility expert. And if they sign off on that, I send it to her, and I go, can you just bang this website or poke it or whatever you do to it and make sure that it is accessible? I know some of these great legal terms, right? So anyway, anything else before I turn this over to Jason? Yes, sir.
Hey, just had a process question. One of the slides that you showed were all sorts of different things that you're evaluating against, accessibility being one of them.
Right.
If I'm a requester that has a piece of software, does your office help walk through each of those areas on your campus, whether it's cybersecurity, data stewards,
right,
accessibility?
Right. The way that we work, the way that Carnegie Mellon works is when it goes into the ServiceNow front door, the UCO, my office, procurement services, all of computing services, the information security office, the AI office, all have access to what comes in. It then gets assigned to one of us in the queue. If it's a big deal, it goes for what we call a tech eval, which was the predecessor of the HECVAT, right, Tom? Is Dugas in the room? No. But the predecessor of the HECVAT was the tech eval that Carnegie Mellon sort of created. And so then it goes, and then we get a process, and then it goes into like sort of the regular, normal legal process where we get involved in negotiating the terms, removing the indemnification because we're a private institution, making the argument as to why they don't want to remove it and why we do. Why I say, well, if I was University of Maryland, Baltimore County, I wouldn't have an indemnity. And they were like, yeah, well, too bad. So you're not. But yeah, that's the way it goes.
Matt, any info, any additional insight into how detailed those prompts are?
Oh, yeah. Well, I wish I could show you because it has, so the first version we went through, when I made the prompt the first time, it gave me sort of the basics. And then as sort of compliance laws changed and as different things went on, I started adding more and more questions to it. Within recently, in other words, one of the things I added because we got hung up on one of these issues of, do you go back down and dig further? I had when we said it was only good for private data, they came back and asked a question that had to do with usage restrictions, which usually comes from the faculty and the researchers at the university. Well, can I do this with it? How can I break it, basically? And so that's when we added that question, and then that gave us all the use restrictions that are usually in Section 3. That's, no derivative works, you can't reverse engineer, all the stuff we could all say by heart that we look at. But yeah, it changes all the time. Brian's after me that all the time. Brian says to me, he goes, did you change it? And I'm like, yeah, I did. I'll send you the new version. And then he inputs it. But it's relatively easy to do. Apparently not today. But it's just, I just add the questions into the edit form and then it goes. So it runs pretty well. We're very happy with it. Everybody seems, our success rate with regard to clearing them, like I said, is about 1,000 a year. So that works really well. And the ones that bounce back out of that are less than a dozen. that somebody comes back and says, oh, okay, I wanted to use it for X instead. So, anything else? All right. Sean said to me at one time, I'm the only lawyer that actually uses AI, but I'm not sure of that. So, yeah, I doubt that too. All right, let's see. We are doing this. That's not you, that's me. That's the one. All right. All right, don't read anything you see in my desktop. Thank you. All right, wait, hold on. I got to hit this button. All right, this is Jason. I met this guy like 2 months ago. He's like really smart. If you have time afterwards, you should talk to Jason. All right, you're up.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. So one of the largest benefits that I'm seeing at our institution in these new days of AI is the willingness to crack the seal on really thorny business processes, right? Like to date, people don't want to touch these things. Oh, this thing just works, and I don't want to. It's too complex. And now all of a sudden we have all these great tools, and people are saying, well, hey, let's revisit this really intense, complex, thorny, human-powered process. And for sure, contract review, negotiation and such is one of them. Reviewing contracts consistently is exceptionally difficult. Reviewing contracts consistently across individuals is almost immeasurably difficult. So let's talk about how I look at a contract. After decades of doing this, I have a process, and my process is pretty straightforward. At the first pass, I read it end to end. I do not have a pen in my hand, I do not type, I do not do anything at all. I read it. And when I'm done reading it, I have 3 things that I'm looking for. How fair is this contract? How transparent is the language? Another way to say that is, sorry, Matt, how slimy might the person be on the other side of this deal? For right or for wrong, that does inform how much attention I pay, given we have an immeasurable volume of these things to do. When these 2 things go up, my temperature goes up, and I start paying a whole lot more attention. And then finally, there's risk. What's the risk to the institution? What is our exposure profile for this thing? And of course, for that, context matters. So the problem I was trying to solve was that I wanted to build a piece of software, a fully encapsulated piece of software that thought about the contracting process in the same way that I do. And there's so many inputs to that. There's Maryland law, there's policy, there's the University System of Maryland policy, there's institutional policy, then there's my personal preference. The example I always give is I do not agree to non-solicitation. It's perfectly legal in the state of Maryland. There's no policy that says I can't agree to not poach a vendor's employees, but I cannot protect against it. It's a decentralized environment. I have no idea what the Division of Professional Studies is doing. In fact, we've gotten burned by that in the past, so I don't agree to those things. You boil all those things down, and it's really difficult to do this work consistently. So, again, context matters. When you first go into this piece of software, and by the way, this piece of software does run. We have not launched into production yet. I'm going to get to that at the end, but it does fully run. I am beta testing it myself internally. So, context matters. And as Matt pointed out, we don't get a lot of information on these requests. We get, oftentimes we get, let's just call it pushback. I saw one last week that said, we asked a simple question of, what are you doing with this software you wish to purchase? And the answer was, I can't believe that I'm actually being bothered to answer these dumb questions, just give me my software. And it just went on and on and on and on from there. It's unbelievable.
I didn't know Dr. Rowe worked at your school too.
Yeah, exactly, right? And that, by the way, I'm not just picking on the faculty, that's faculty and staff. It is, nobody wants to answer these questions, they don't understand what we're actually trying to do is protect the institution, and they are bothered by the very nature of these questions. So I've boiled these down to a very, very specific, almost surgical level of questioning. Because I can't just ask a big open text box, hey, what are you doing with this thing? Doesn't work, right? So things like, will it touch student data? Does it have access to employee data? Does it have access to protected health information? What about the individuals who are going to use it, right? So you see, I'm being really leading, really specific with these questions. You cannot, there's no opportunity to say, knock it off, I don't want to answer this anymore. If you want to make this request, you have to follow these rules, right? What will it integrate with? And you see what's behind these questions, right? Operational details. Here I do leave some open-ended interrogatory here so that people can explain in more depth about what they're doing here. And then, of course, the financial information about that, not that that is the main determinant, but it certainly does contribute to it. If you're buying $1 million toy versus a $20 a month thing, that is not, of course, all of the story, but it certainly informs it. Okay. So I like to think of AI as a team of employees of mine. Each one has a really specific job. And what I'm finding from that, and I think you'll see evidence about this in the literature, is that these giant one-shot prompts, no matter how powerful the large language model is, they're hit or miss, right? They introduce a whole lot of variability, let's say. And so the more focused you can get each one of these model invocations, the higher the likelihood that you're going to get a reliable, consistent result from them. So we upload a contract, we ask questions of the requester, and then multiple passes. So Matt showed you his returns results in a matter of seconds. This will take probably 5 minutes in a longer contract, could be even longer. And it's multiple parallel invocations of very specific models. First, I extract the text, then there's a fairness analysis of that. And by the way, all these are done in Claude. Then I've got transparency assessment and a risk analysis, and then it's generating summaries and strategic alignment. We're going to get into all of that, but it's doing a whole lot of things, a lot of heavy lifting, but never all at once. All right? As you can see, it's running down through the list here. I didn't want a live demo here for you, and a brief sidebar on that. I didn't want to demo live because the last time I did that, I picked on Salesforce, and I had to hear about what my problem is with Salesforce, right? My tool is rough on contracts. And Salesforce is not a nice contract, as we all know, right? And I couldn't find one that wasn't of that ilk, so I just, we're going to do this as a series of screenshots, let's just say. Okay, so there's those three lenses I talked about, right? Fairness, transparency, and risk. So this, by the way, was a real contract that was in here. And you can see its fairness score, 32 out of 100 already. Yikes, this thing is grossly unbalanced, biased towards the vendor. Problematic, right? I don't approach any contract with, I have to win at all costs. I just want to start from the middle. If we start from the middle, we're all going to have a whole lot better time getting to the end, which is I give you the money, you give me the things. Transparency. Whoever drafted this thing is up for some shenanigans, right? They're up for a little bit of misdirection, some obscure language, it's so complex. I go, oh, forget it, I can't make sense of that, move on, right? Now, risk. Look at this risk score, 92 out of 100. Is this problematic? Do I need to pay attention to this thing? Absolutely. And again, that's factoring in context. It's factoring in all sorts of different things about this, including my own personal preferences about how I want to protect the institution. Okay, so first thing it spits back out is a big executive summary. Not that big, really, but big enough, right? So just tell me, what in the world do you think about this? So I have redacted this one. And sure enough, there are concerns all over the place in here, right? And there's data protection issues, there's governance issues, and it's explaining the major 30,000-foot perspective on this thing. And as you can already see from the score that appears right above this, this is problematic, pay attention. Okay, then we get to section by section risk assessment. And again, remember, this has taken I've seen some of them even take 10 minutes to get through. It is really crunching on this information. So the nice bit about this section level risk assessment that I'm going to show you is that at the end of the day, it produces a heat map. And that heat map allows me to go into a negotiation already knowing what the most important things are to me, but it also tells me what things might not be that important to me, and allows me to do the standard lawyerly trick of, hey, listen, this one's going to kill me if I don't get it. Oh, fine, I give up. You can have that one, knowing full well I didn't care about that one in the first place, right? So this is what I'm leveraging to do that, right? So here's an example heat map from a real contract that I will not name, and no, it's not Salesforce. When I mouse over them, the third one from the left on the top is you'll see that. It just allows me to briefly look over them. It'll give me additional detail. We have highly asymmetric termination rights that favor the vendor in there, right? I must negotiate that. So understand that there are rubrics behind each one of these things. I've developed fairness scores and transparency scores and risk scores that are all being used to evaluate that, and we can tweak those over time. Okay, in the interest of time, because I see we're running a little bit late, I'm going to skip past this guy for a second.
Talk about the Maryland tort claim then?
No, I'm not. I will. We'll talk about that later at dinner.
All right.
Okay, so I do not rely upon, as I've alluded to, I don't rely upon the large language models knowing all the things about what's important to me. So I use a variety of RAG tricks, of retrieval augmented generation tricks in the background. This is graph RAG for those technically interested. And I am ingesting all sorts of documents. In this somewhat fictitious example on the screen, I've ingested the Maryland Procurement Policy and Procedure Manual, which is a 93-page tome. Anybody with problems sleeping, I'm glad to email that to you later, as well as my own contracting playbook that I've developed over the years. We can import all sorts of things into here. They'll be used during runtime. Now, one thing to call your attention to, in each one of the blocks, you'll see the first block has a role associated with it, a little button that says edit roles next to it. And so that first one says IT reviewer. The second one says contract administrator. So we can take different documents. Let's say there's a cybersecurity set of policies. Those can be used when you are reviewing as a cybersecurity role. Or a contract administrator might have a totally different set of documents that are loaded at runtime and used to evaluate the contract against that. So when the findings come back out, you can see across the top, there's my fairness, transparency, and risk again. And you'll see each one of these findings. In this first one, the university is required to indemnify the vendor. Obviously, we cannot do that. That's a critical failure. And so it tells me why that is. If I were to click on the review button, it would actually pull up and show me the exact language where it did that. Now, this is not where I actually do my redlining. I'm just still at, we're like, if we were at 30,000 feet before on the summary, we're maybe at 10,000 feet of altitude now. I'm starting to get towards the ground, and I'm going, okay, yeah, there's some real problems. I'm kind of getting the lay of the land about where I need to focus. You can also see the vendor is attempted to retain all intellectual property rights. There's asymmetric termination rights that we saw before in the heat map, but I can go on down the line across them. This is, again, a good barometer for assessing how problematic this particular contract might be. Okay, roles, I talked about them a second ago, but you can have an unlimited number of roles in here. The current ones I have in here are contract administrator. I can change my hat, be a security analyst. I can change my hat again and be a privacy officer or an IT reviewer. All of us have different things we're looking at. So, and again, that's using not only RAG, but it's using totally different sets of rubrics. So you can get a phenomenal score from a cybersecurity perspective, but a terrible score from a contract administrator perspective. And that's real world contract stuff, right? This might be really great. It's why we have teams of people that look at these things, except I don't have a team. So an army of one begets this whole piece of software that allows me to have a team of employees that can look at this thing from totally different perspectives. All right, so when we first started up and we go to put a contract in, here it is saying, which one of those hats do you wish to wear today? I do intend to connect this into SSO, so this can actually be personalized, so when I log in, it automatically knows what role I'm looking at and automatically knows all of my documents. All right, interest of time, I'm going to get past the rubrics. Here is just an example of the scoring rubrics that this thing does. So you can build out an unlimited number of rubrics in each one of those different areas. Here we are, I'm looking at data export capabilities. Contracts must ensure that UMBC can export its data in standard formats, right? So I'm not leaving anything to chance is really the take-home point here, right? I am being really surgical in the way that I am prescribing how I want each one of those AI employees to be working. I can configure scoring thresholds. I mean, there is literally nothing that's behind the scenes here. Everything is fed in here at runtime when you are doing an evaluation. Okay, so all that's well and good, right? It's fun, it's cute, it's technically interesting for sure. But what do I really care about? I care about redlining the document. So, I couldn't fit it all on the screen, so the left side of the screen is the actual contract document with the text extracted, and I'm highlighting the section in question. So each one of those findings is actually highlighted inside of the smart contract editor. On the right-hand side of the screen is the recommendation. So each one of those findings that we saw before, they're reflected in a pane on the right-hand side. You can see at the bottom, 17 of 19 of them I'm currently looking at, and this is an excessive assignment right imbalance. It tells me what the problem is here. Then it shows me the original text, then a suggested change. If I simply click accept, it'll actually redline the contract. Now, here's a neat addition somewhat recently. I have found that the more information that we provide back to the vendor about why we want that change, why we cannot agree to this particular term or condition, it's just orders of magnitude easier, simpler, faster, more efficient, less painful process. Because oftentimes, when we get busy, we just redline the thing and go, no, I'm not agreeing to indemnity, no, I'm not agreeing to limitation of liability. But we get these things back, they go, yeah, well, I'm saying no to your no. That's not helpful. So my tool has an export button. It will produce a Word doc with all this redlining, and all of the justification for my changes appear as comments in Word. Now, that's cool feature number one. Cool feature number two is if I export it as PDF, it gives me a different set of commentary on the document. Whereas the Word doc is for public consumption, the PDF is for internal use. So it will literally explain to me, this is why we probably shouldn't do that. Could you do it? Yeah, you could do it, but I'd recommend you don't do it. And by the way, this is important, this one's not that important. So all that guidance, that negotiation guidance, comes to me in a different document than the Word doc. It's used for totally different purposes. Okay, last one is strategic alignment. So our president and provost have outlined a set of institutional strategic priorities as part of our new strategic planning process. And, I would think, Matt, you'd probably agree that, we do these contracts and we stuff them into an e-procurement system or some other document repository and we move on with our lives, right?
That's what I do.
And the problem with moving on with our lives is that we have no idea what's in our wake. And we have no idea about trends. What kinds of risk are we taking on? If I need to go back and say, there's new guidance from the Attorney General about X, Y, or Z, I'd say it is essentially impossible for any of us to go back and say, well, what's our actual risk exposure based on that? You would have to take an army of students or something and do e-discovery across thousands of contracts and figure out and even then it would be difficult. Well, since I'm doing this for each contract, I already have those data. So I'm putting those data into a graph database so that temporally, over time, I can see how well are we aligned with the president's strategic priorities. I can see how well, how much risk we are assuming in any given risk profile area. So a lot of stuff, and here we go. You can see financial stewardship is one of the president's priorities, legal compliance, data protection, academic mission. So all these things, I can see how well this contract aligns, and then I can see how well overall these contracts are in alignment with I like to think of it as the president has said, pay attention to these 5 pillars. And then I want to say, well, how well am I doing with the money we're spending and the resources that we are expending in remaining, are we moving towards those? Are we moving away from them? So, questions?
I want to make a comment.
Please.
All right, so since the beginning, since ChatGPT was released, at last count, there are 172 AI contract review models. None of them that I have looked at does this, which I found really fascinating and interesting. When Jason and I started to talk about this, nobody was scoring anything or figuring out what to do. The back end of this is in all of them. In other words, you load your playbook with your clauses. If it goes through and finds an indemnification, it spits it out and says this is why you're doing it, but gives no analysis as to why you're doing it, which causes you to have to go back into the model and say what it is. So I think that what this brings to the table is sort of a different analysis of the view, right? You're looking at different things. And the best part about this is Jason brings a really common sense approach to this, because of all the things he is, he's not a lawyer, which is hard to believe, right? But at least you're not today, right?
Not yet.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's what I think is really fascinating. In the bottom part, just as a comment, one of the things that we scrambled with now is every time there's a hiccup in Washington and an executive order gets signed, how many times do we have to go back in and look at our contracts, especially around DEI, and pull out sections because, right, the executive order said it's the responsibility of the contractor to pull out to make sure that your subcontractors and people you hire are not violating these executive orders. So having these, there's no more, just having a simple contract database is no longer really an acceptable option going into the future because of all these things that are going to change. Every time there's a hiccup in privacy policy, that impacts everything we do, right? If all of a sudden the GDPR changes tomorrow, we're all going to know about it because we got to figure out how Google and everybody else are going to change their privacy policy. But that's just an observation. I'm not asking for any additional, I don't want a comment that said I was an editor.
Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think it's a really good, I think it gives you a really good insight into how the mind of people who read contracts work.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Tim from Inert 2. Great presentation from both of you. Shout out to Sue. I'm here because of her. But question for you, Jason. So there's a lot of moving pieces to your system. And as you know, these language models, they're non-deterministic. And we know it could do X, Y, Z, but sometimes it doesn't do it to what we think are standards, right? That's why we have additional documentation to feed it. My question is, since you're doing something like a legal review, which is, there is a high bar of getting things right, what kind of testing did you do to make sure that when you're gonna analyze, the 10 plus, 20 plus, 30 plus contracts out into the future, that every analysis that it makes is pretty or really accurate?
Yep. Excellent question. Thank you. So to start, this is a React web application with a lot of pretty high-powered data infrastructure behind it. The software is tested extensively. So I came from a corporate software development background. There are probably, there's at least as many lines of testing code for this piece of software as there are actual production lines of code. And so that speaks directly to your question that I have snippets of language that the actual automated testing process, the unit tests for the methods that say, hey, produce me this risk assessment, are actually looking at real contract language. And I'm expecting, it's never going to be perfect, right? But I'm expecting to be in the ballpark on every iteration of that run. So that's number one. The second one is, when this runs, and if this were a technical presentation, I'd love to dive all the way into it, but unfortunately, we don't have time for that. So what happens is this is a multi-model consensus strategy in the background. So I'm running against a smaller model first, then I run against more powerful models when there is, a false negative or a false positive, depending on the rubric that I built inside of here. And so it will then call a more powerful model and say, hey, this guy over here, he says X, Y, and Z. Go check on that. That's an important detail. And then I go to a more powerful model and say, hey, do you concur with this? Right? So all of a sudden I'm doing multiple models and they're both checking each other's work. So it's not a perfect answer, it's not a perfect system, and I'm really okay with that, because at the end of the day, this is not a fully automated, like I put it in and you buy your toy kind of system. This is guidance.
Yeah,
This is an advocate.
I did like how you said that you essentially made kind of unit tests or exams for the
That's
system.
correct.
One last question, I do
Sure.
have to ask this. You mentioned you wish you did a technical deep dive. Did you submit this talk for TechX 2026?
I did not.
Well, next year.
Thank you. Yeah, please go.
I just want to just add one thing to you from a contract life cycle perspective, right? Because you mentioned in the front part of your question, how do you know you get it right? Yeah, you can only get it right as of right now, because you're never quite sure. And if there's anybody from Salesforce in the room? Okay. So,
It's too late, I
yeah.
already bashed
So,
him.
I mean, the bottom line is, if Salesforce doesn't like its agreement, it will force you into renegotiating it. And so, even though I have the Salesforce agreement right as of today, I know if they add something to it or decide they want to change the pricing model or add AI to something that shouldn't add AI, I'm going to get a new contract and they're going to tell me, you got to renegotiate your agreement. So the best you can ever do in the contract basis is to say, I got to get it right as I know the universe today. You can look down the road and you can say, what happens if? But that's the real, right? That's the problem. Because when the clash becomes between the vendor and you, that's, you're like, what are you going to do? You're not going to, if you got Salesforces tied up in your campus, to the degree that it is, you're going to have to renegotiate. You don't have a choice. You're not suing them. Although I would assume VMware, but that's another issue. That
Right.
went for me. So anyway.
So I have two questions. One is, have these techniques, Matt, improved your handicap?
Yes.
And, okay,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
good, that's an important KPI.
For sure.
The,
That is the only thing it's about.
the second question, I haven't even figured out how to ask it because I feel like I might, be hauled off to jail for asking it. So you know how you're driving down the highway and everybody pretty much says, I can probably go 7, 8, 9 miles over the limit, and everybody's good with that, right? There's a little bit of capacitance in enforcement, and we all kind of sign up for that. That's part of this sort of social contract of compliance. Matt, when you mentioned, when a privacy law changes, right, we need to go back and look at it, and it would seem to me that the creation and adoption of these tools could make institutions more compliant more rapidly. Will the agencies or other bodies that are responsible for auditing against those changes, will they turn up the heat, or will the capacitance, will that buffer in that social contract of, well, the law changed, but we'll give you a little grace period, or compliance is a little mushy? Do you think that's going to make things tighter in some kind of way? Very, very speculative, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, from our I know, I'm pretty sure after the first executive order came out from the President of the United States, we were in a cold sweat about a lot of stuff. And I think it's interesting. I've been the contracts director, it'll be 16 years, and the amount of questions I field on what does the contract say now has increased exponentially, because people are more insightful to what's going on with this contract, what language is in that. We did a deal with this company. This company now is not in good light with the federal government. What are we going to do? So I just think you're in the enforcement part of it. I mean, I've seen some of these audits come through, currently, and it's very, it's like, you don't have XYZ, you got problems. That's the way it looks at it. It's really tough. It's an evolving place. I don't know how you guys do it.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, as a public, if I was as a public, I think you can always run behind the state government and go, hey, not my problem. Look at the 90-page procurement manual. But as a private, you're always sitting there, I always say it's rolling the dice against the endowment. So. Wow.
Nope, got one more.
No,
47,
operational
46,
question for
45,
y'all. Are your systems connected to any other business units at the university? Like, for example, if you approve a software agreement, does that automatically get added to like an approved vendor list for other people at the university to use?
So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is not this piece of software yet. So I've built a pretty elaborate software catalog that has entanglements all over the place. It also has a big AI component to it to help you find the software that will meet your needs. So ultimately, this will inform that in a lot of ways. You think about risk alone, right? If I have 5 different pieces of software to do, task X, you better believe I want, to give you the ones that have the least risk for the institution, right? I want to filter those 3 lenses that I looked at back to the software catalog and help people make good decisions.
Yeah, as I said, was the reason the UCO agreed to the front door when we wanted to do this was there was going to be a centralization which is occurring in all software. And so all software has to go through one space. And the idea is that when you get to that page, when you get to the software front door page, there's 2 choices. Please check what we already have, and that's A through Z, all the things that are already approved that you can download and move, or request a piece of software. As we approve it, it moves over across into the accepted pile. And then the problem is, I think the problem is, there's a trend, I don't know if you agree with this, we haven't talked about this, but there's a trend of bundling. I don't know if has anybody come across,
yeah.
How many people have had bundling?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, like it's back to the original phone thing, right? And so now it's like, I don't want this, but in order to get the price, I have to bundle it. And so now you're like, well, now I have to have approved bundled software that I really don't want to have people use. And so there's like, so we're looking at that, but the idea behind the Carnegie Mellon's version of this was exactly what Jason said, which is, we want to cut down on stuff so that we can say, even though we've made this easier for us, we're able to say to the campus at large, look, if you're going to go outside what we've already approved, this is going to be really onerous. It could take months. And like, why don't you just use what we have?
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, I got to negotiate it. It's going to take forever. Red lines are going to happen. But the idea is, look, if we have an approved video conferencing tool, just use it. I don't need to add another one. So,
Great.
Thank you.
I put up the tech stack in case anybody wanted to see. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.